Real quick before we get into this video, just want to share the GGGG for this month of April of 2021. Each month, Bob the Beholder picks one of my Patreon supporters to receive a gratitude gift. And for this month, we have potentially two. If I manage to receive my Street Fighter pledge, then that will be one of the gratitude gifts. And then secondly is a all-in pledge valued at $100 to the Talisman Saber Kickstarter that's going on right now through the end of the month. Make sure you check out this video where I highlight those pieces. Now back to the video. Hello friends, another birthday and another 3D printer. So my very first printer was the FlashForge Finder, which I recently got rid of because the X motor was broken and it wasn't stopping correctly. So I basically gave that away. And the other reason why I got rid of it was because the build plate was only 5 inches, which is pretty small, but it took up a lot of desk space. So I did get rid of that original printer. But for my birthday 2 years ago, I still have my Prusa MK3S, which is currently my favorite printer. And for my last birthday, I still have the Ender 5. And both of those are going strong. Now it will be nice to have a third printer because I've had this huge backlog of things that I've wanted to print. So hopefully we will see. And this is the Prusa Mini, which I did order a month ago. I would have gotten the $350 version that you put together because it looked like from other videos that it wasn't very hard for that kit. But that was going to be almost a year-long lead time before that was going to deliver. So I went ahead and paid the extra $50 for this $400 kit that is already pre-assembled. And honestly, I didn't think that there was a lot of assembly in the original one in the first place. So I'm not 100% sure what they mean when they say this is pre-assembled. But we will see. But it did take a month for them to deliver this one. So I know that COVID hit some of their supply chain, so it was a little bit more difficult for them to get some of the supplies that they needed to build these out. So I know that there is a little bit of a delay. And I did pay the additional $20 for the filament sensor. So I found that I really appreciate that a lot in my Prusa MK3S. I do not have a filament sensor in my Ender 5. So when that runs out of filament, it just keeps printing as if it had it. So I like the filament printer, and I think the cost of only $20 to have that sensor is well worth it. In the meantime, I have seen other people replace the filament feeder with a Bondtech, $60 Bondtech upgrade, because some people complained about their prints being under extruded and some gaps in the printing. So we'll see. I'll do some test prints and see whether or not I am going to go ahead and go for that upgrade, or whether this has enough detail in the printing that I am happy with the stock feeder. So this is just a receipt saying that they tested everything and everything works. I'm going to stand here so it disappear out of the screen for a second. This is the LCD. A jump drive. Aha! The most important, the gummy bears. So these are all the parts that come in the box, and I'm not going to show in this video how I put it together because there's a lot of other videos, but it looks like this is going to come together really quickly. So I'll be right back.
4 to 6 days later.
All right, so it took me about an hour to put together this pre-assembled kit. And honestly, 15 minutes of that was fiddling around with attaching the LCD screen. And that really is the only complaint I had about the build, was that the screw that they suggested, the M3 by 12 millimeter screw, is too short. And so I needed to jerry rig the 20 millimeter, the medium size bolt that came with the set, and had to put on 2 nuts in order to shorten it. And so that was really the only trouble that I ran into putting it together. It was actually fairly easy to put all together. And as you can see here, one of the first things I did was print off this spool holder. because having the spool sitting on the table right next to it defeats the whole purpose of this being a mini version that has a smaller footprint. So I'll put links in the descriptions below with all of the files that I used to print this out from Thingiverse. I went ahead and purchased some of these 608 bearings, which incidentally, you could just use the bearings that's found on this that comes with the Prusa Mini, just so that this spins more readily up here. So that's worked out really well, and this has been printing for 5 days, and just wanted to show you all the stuff that I've been able to print. And clearly this wasn't just on the Mini. This is to show how much stuff that you can print in 5 days by using the 3 printers that I have. And I don't mind that it's a smaller form factor, because to be honest, most of the things that I'm printing size-wise is fine for this, because even on my other 2 machines, my other 2 full-size machines, a lot of times I'm printing pieces that would fit on here anyway. For example, this tower from City of Firwood, all of these pieces would be able to fit on this printer. These pieces here that are from Kraken Studios, I'm making a Blitz Bowl field, and all of these plates, they're small enough that they would fit on here. And even when I'm printing these off of my bigger printers, I'm only printing one at a time, because the failure rate of these is pretty high, because I print them standing up like this. And if something goes wrong, the whole thing tips over or falls off. So I'm not even filling up my entire build plate with these anyway. So as a secondary machine, I actually think having the smaller one and the cheaper Prusa makes a lot of sense. Now, if I could only have one printer, I would still pick the Prusa MK3S, as you're going to have the largest build plate for that. And for some pieces, you're going to need that size. But this is a great secondary printer because it's half the cost of my MK3S. And the smaller form factor works out really well, and the 7-inch build plate is actually plenty big to print off, like I said, most of what you see here. So I am really happy that I did get this, and it was pretty much as soon as I built it, it was plug and play, and it's been running for the past 5 days. I haven't had to do anything. I did the first layer setting. Once I was done with that, pretty much it's been smooth sailing. With my MK3S, I was using a glue stick in order to hold pieces down, but now I know that you don't really need to do that. As long as you wipe down the plate with some isopropyl alcohol, every once in a while it cleans off all of the grease and it sticks really well. So overall, super happy. The thing that I like the least about my Ender 5, I have to readjust the bed for that every 5 or so prints. So the thing that I really like about the Prusas is the auto bed leveling system. Additional purchases that I made was I did buy these T-slot nuts, as well as a bunch of metric screws. I'm realizing that as I have 3 3D printers now, all of them use metric screws, and as I'm making adjustments and things like that, it's been a pain just to buy a couple here and there at my local Lowe's. So just ordered this relatively cheap off of Amazon. Again, I'll provide links in the descriptions below. The other thing I really like about this is it is super quiet. It's much quieter than my other 2 machines. I can't remember if my MK3S was as quiet as this just over time. I mean, it's 2 years old now, and so it squeaks quite a bit as it's moving around. I notice as well, one of the motors is fairly loud on the MK3S, but this is really silent. And so I'm going to be moving this possibly over to next to my work desk where I have my in-home office, because it is quiet enough. I wouldn't move my other 2 machines next to it, because during conference calls you'd definitely be able to hear that, but this machine you can barely hear. So that's another convenience with the Mini. And I've been super impressed. You know, after printing all of these pieces, I've been looking for under extrusion, which was one of the complaints about the motor that feeds the filament into the print head. But I have not seen any flaws or any missed lines, at least no more missed lines than from my MK3S. So I'm super happy. I don't think I need to do the upgrade with the filament motor, and we'll keep it as is. But I'll tell you later on if that changes. So overall, super happy with this purchase. I think this is a fantastic, especially secondary machine. And so here is my recommendation. If you can afford it, definitely get the MK3S, but that's going to cost you about $750, $800 with shipping, at least here in the United States. It's $900 or $950 shipped for the pre-built version, but I think it's well worth it because it's pretty much a plug-and-play machine. You do not have to mess with it a whole lot to get it working. And then I would suggest this machine, especially if you're going to have a secondary machine. This machine will do 90% of what you need to print off. For me, it costs $450 shipped. I still think this is worth it, even though this is more expensive than my Ender 5. And then finally, my Ender 5, after having it for a year, I got it last birthday. I definitely will keep using it, but in retrospect, if I were to go with an Ender or a cheaper machine, I wish I would have gotten the 6 rather than the 5, because the whole build plate moving up and down is sort of a pain. And I think that's one of the reasons why it goes out of alignment, where I have to do bed leveling so often, is because that whole build plate is going up and down. Versus the 6 or even the Ender 3, right? The build plate is not moving up and down on the Z-axis, and so I think it's a little bit more easier to keep level. But definitely, I think a high priority is having automatic bed leveling. I think that's well worth its money, and so the CR6 does have auto bed leveling, and some of my Patreon supporters who have that machine like it. So I would suggest that over the Ender 3 or the Ender 5. I mean, the biggest advantage is that I am speeding up my prints a lot. So typically, even with 2 machines, this would take a whole week, but I was able to crank this out in just a few days. And obviously all this terrain that I'm making, again, this was in 5 days. So just imagine how much of your printing time will be cut down just by adding machines. I don't think I feel a need though to get a 4th machine to have that kind of print farm, because at this point, trying to juggle which machine is printing which prints, having 3 sort of feels like the sweet spot. I think if I added 4 or had more than that, I would sort of lose track of which machine is printing which part for the project. 3 seems like the sweet spot where I can keep track of everything like that. And none of my machines are connected to Wi-Fi, so I am manually inserting either the SD card. For this, it is a USB, and I did purchase this dongle just so that I wouldn't be reaching back here in the back of the machine to insert the USB stick. I just bring it over to my computer, upload the files that I need, and then print it off that way. And I don't mind doing that. I know some people have internet connection to their machine, so they're sending files directly. But for me, it's just part of my workflow. But this is going to help a lot with the channel, as I will be able to print out a lot more terrain and a lot more gaming supplies with this. And I'll be featuring a lot of these prints in future videos. So make sure that you subscribe, hit the like button, check out my Patreon page to see what the GGGG is for this month. Otherwise, happy printing, happy hobbying. We'll see you next time.